This is the Living in Clarity podcast. I'm Coach Ratner, and today we're filming from Old City Radio Studios, sponsored by Faces International. And today we have a very special guest today. I'm so honored to have here Dave Mason. Dave, it's great to see you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, the reason why I have Dave Mason, he just came out with a new book. It is called Hurry Up and Fail. You can see it here if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, it just came out today, self-published. And I have to tell you, I don't read a lot, but I read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell, a lot of self-help books. And there's always I have a few books in my library. I would say less than 5 or 6 of them where I do not loan them out. And I have to tell you, this is one of them. And I think you've done a phenomenal job on this book.
Thank you so much.
I'm really very impressed. In fact, I read some books twice, and this is one of the books I'm excited about reading again. I read it last week when I was in Italy. I literally started on a Friday night, and I finished by Saturday at 1 o'clock.
Wow.
I mean, it was very, very fast. It's not a short book, but it's not long. But I just couldn't put it down. How did you come up with all these concepts and ideas about Hurry Up and Fail? Well, let's start first of all, how you got the idea of the title Hurry Up and Fail.
So I really stumbled across it. This was years ago. We were teaching a course around our book, The Size of Your Dreams, that one over there on the table. And it's called Dream Design Manifest. And we had all these people in this course. And we actually, the first time we tried to teach it, we were in the Ecuadorian rainforest. And we had this beautiful location. And we shot this whole beautiful course. And we tried to get everything just right. And we never, ever even went live with it. We were just so afraid, maybe it fell short a little bit here. Maybe it fell short a little bit there. And a couple years later, we're just like, you know what? Let's just go and teach this stuff live. Why do we need to have the perfect thing that we're doing here? And we start teaching it the first night, and we say, you know what? We don't really know exactly what this course is going to be, but we decided we just wanted to hurry up and fail. And I kind of braced myself for the reaction of everyone that all paid good money to be in this course, and they just heard 5 minutes in that the guy running the course didn't really know what he was doing, and they all started to applaud.
That's really strange. When you said that, let me hurry up and fail, did you think to yourself, I shouldn't have said that?
I thought it was kind of a risky thing to say that, you know what, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just going to kind of hurry up and fail. And they loved it.
Was that imposter syndrome?
I don't think it was imposter syndrome. We definitely talk a bit about in the book about imposter syndrome, how so many of us feel that. And you know what, maybe to a degree it was. Maybe I was feeling a little bit, less than I was there. But part of it was also just this fact that, you know what, I didn't know exactly what was going to come out. And I wanted to just say, I'm going to go forward with what I have right now and see how it works and see what works and see what doesn't and adjust on the fly. And the rest of the group, it's like they took it on as a mantle, and people started using the hashtag Hurry Up and Fail. They'd start doing things that they didn't feel ready for and putting themselves out into the world. And it just became this kind of calling card within the group. And I'm like, okay, people resonate with this concept. I need to actually delve more into this.
Yeah. So it's a great title for a book, by the way. Is the title has it been used before for another book, or is this the only book that called Hurry Up and Fail?
I have no idea.
Yes, I Googled it today, and I didn't see another book like that. A lot of titles of books have been used. I have a new book coming out on self-esteem coming out next year, and it's called Unloved. And there are books called Unloved that have been published, but they're all romance novels, not self-help books. So I'm figuring I can use that title again. And but it's really so. Let's get into so we got into the idea of how you came up with the name Hurry Up and Fail. So just to let you know that Dave has produced 4 of the books out. And I've mentioned some of his books before. That my 2 favorite, well, only 2 I've read, other ones, is called The Size of Your Dreams. And this is a book about personal growth into a novel, into a story.
Yes.
And and the other book is called The Cash Machine right here. And The Cash Machine, I got to tell you, is a brilliant, brilliant book. They're both brilliant books about personal finance. And I learned, someone who's been in investing and have built businesses, I thought I knew everything. I mean, there's so much in that book I had never heard before. And it's built around a love story. And that's the most amazing thing, that you could take a love story it's I would say it's kosher. It's not like there's not anything going on in there. But you take a love story, and there's a lot of character development, and there's a lot of tension between the two, because like he likes her, she likes him, but she doesn't like to spend money, and she likes to spend money, and the book just comes so many great lessons in life. And so I was expecting to have a good book in this Hurry Up and Fail, and I was still blown away. So let's get into some of the concepts that you talk about in the book. You start talking about Sarah Blakely. Let's talk about her for a second.
So what's amazing about Sarah Blakely is that she started with almost nothing. She had no experience in this area. She created the company Spanx with only $5,000.
But she was in sales.
She was in sales. She sold fax machines.
Yeah, so she was hardcore. That's hardcore sales, by the way. You know, anytime you're selling fax machines or printers or copiers, that's hardcore selling, right? Door to door, pretty much.
And Sarah Blakely just showed incredible bravery as she went out with her new product. And first she was fearless in getting people to make it. And then, I mean, she went right into the buyer of Neiman Marcus with like her only product in a Ziploc bag. And the woman was so unimpressed. And she said to her, you know, can you come with me to the bathroom? And the buyer's like, what? It's like, just come with me to the ladies' room. I want to show you how this thing works. And she literally took Spanx into the bathroom and showed her how her butt looked without Spanx and how her butt looked with Spanx. And the woman's like, okay, I finally get it. Yes, I'm putting it in 7 stores. I want to run with it.
But that's not the amazing thing about the story.
It's not the amazing thing about the story. The amazing thing about the story is people say to Sarah, how did you do this? The concept of Spanx was not novel. After she came out with Spanx, many, many women told her, you know what, they'd been doing the same thing, cutting the toes off of their pantyhose for years.
Now, the idea of Spanx is that you have no panty lines. Is that the idea? Well, it smooths out the butt, I guess? The idea...
The idea of Spanx, very simply, is that it's pantyhose without feet. That was the initial conception.
Okay.
That pantyhose exactly doesn't have panty lines. It's not going to show through her see-through cream pants that she had bought and couldn't wear because she was showing panty lines. She was embarrassed about that, and she didn't want to wear it with sandals because she can't wear pantyhose with sandals. So she just cut off the feet. And she realized, hey, I've got a product here. And she went out and she tried to get it made, which was very difficult, and she had to really use force of her will to get through there. And she then had to try to sell it, and she got into Oprah's hands right away. She did all kinds of incredible things. And people always say, Sarah, how did you do this? You had no experience in product manufacturing. You had almost no money. How did you get through this? And she tells this story. She says, when I was a child, Sarah Blakely, she says, you know, she'd come home from school and her father would say, how did you fail today? And it wasn't like making fun of the kids because they failed. It was the very opposite. It was encouraging and rewarding people for failing. And she grew up thinking that failure was really not trying. That she got rewarded in her family for trying things that were above her head and falling short and rewarding the efforts. And for most of us, it's the exact opposite. You know, we start out that way when we're really young. Like every baby. I give the analogy of like...
I love how you start. I had to go back to the beginning of the book again. Like, what? Could you tell the story? Go ahead and tell it. But the baby.
Tell the story of... If you think when a baby comes home and, you know, they're first learning how to walk, they get up and they fall, and they get up and they fall, and they get up and they fall. And the parents tell them, what, you're a loser? What kind of a step was that? I'm embarrassed to be seen with you. It's like, no, they embrace them like, oh, you can do it, come on. And they cheer them on. They cheer on your failures. But like at a certain point, I think it really shifts in school. We get there and you hand in a paper, and the teacher takes out their red pen and they put like a red A on it, or a B or C or D and even an F. They tell you this is what you are. And the crazy thing is, if you think you take somebody who's gone from an F to a D to a C to a B, now to an A. Well, this is awesome, right?
Yes.
This is what the school system is made for.
Yes.
They've taken somebody who couldn't read, they couldn't write, they couldn't do anything, and they've worked their way up. This person should be rewarded, right? No, they've got a C average.
Right.
They've got a C average. This person is going to get into a lousy school because we don't reward failure. We don't reward progress. We reward being excellent at all times.
Yes.
And as one of the chapters, I start with this line from Stephen Wright, you know, if at first you don't succeed, hide all evidence you ever tried.
Yes.
And that's really how we look at failure, as it is something to be embarrassed about. It's something to be avoided. And it's the exact opposite. We need to go towards it, but we also need to go towards failure intelligently, because not all failures are created equal. There are ways of actively engineering failure so that we can learn more from our mistakes. And that's what we need to do. And that's what this book really tries to unpack.
Yeah, you give lots of great examples. Like you mentioned Sarah Blakely. You know, I was amazed when she got her first sale in Neiman Marcus. You think, oh, let's go out and have a beer and celebrate. No, she went to the store every single day, and she told all the employees, especially in the shoe department, why they can buy these Spanx and not have to affect what they wore in their shoes. And she went to the clothing department, and you said she went out and bought this cheap plastic display case, I guess, for her product, and put it right at the cash register without permission from anyone in the store. And then people started complaining to the president of Neiman Marcus that this woman's here bothering us all the time. He looked at her sales and goes, she's spending $1 million. She sold $1 million. Let's leave her alone. Right?
Exactly. And this was one of my great lessons from Sarah Blakely, because you know, I would have gotten that contract from Neiman Marcus. I mean, first of all, I probably wouldn't have gotten it in the first place. I never would have pushed myself to the front door
she has
she did.
She has chutzpah.
She had tremendous chutzpah. But even after Sarah Blakely got the contract from Neiman Marcus, she said the mistake people make is then they pat themselves on the back, have a beer, like you said, and then wait to see all the sales come in. But usually it's the opposite. She was selling a product that nobody knew existed. Nobody was going to ask for it. The salespeople didn't know how to sell it. Had she sat and patted herself on the back, Neiman Marcus would have bought all the stock. It would have sat on their shelves for 3 months. Nobody would have bought it. They would have returned it to her. She would have had to take it back, and they would have said, sorry, this product is clearly a dud.
Right. It doesn't mean the product's not great. It doesn't mean that. It just means that no one knows about it.
Exactly. And honestly, as I bring up in the book, I look at my books like you say you're a fan of my books. You've given me feedback multiple times on my books. I'm very proud of my books. And yet I know my books have not sold a ton because I haven't hustled like Sarah Blakely.
Right.
I haven't put myself out there with the same amount of determination, I'm going to go through any walls to get my books in the hands of people that she did. And I know had she written my books, they didn't have to be any better than they were. She would have made them bestsellers.
You know, I totally agree. I think that if Sarah Blakely came up with this book, Hurry Up and Fail, it would be one of the top selling books on Amazon. That's what I believe. I think all the ones that I've read are the same way. And it's funny, writing a book is, I have another book coming out very soon called Infinite Marriage. It's the 4 phases to a loving relationship. And unfortunately, I'm using a vanity press, and it's going to be coming out in the next few months. But like, once you write the book and get it published, no one's going to buy the book. I have to get there and somehow try to sell the book.
Exactly.
That's the hard part. Writing the part's the easy thing, even though it takes a long time. It's what I want to get into. I want to kind of skip a little bit. This idea, something called, I have to find it, my notes, about NaNoWriMo by Chris Beatty. He started this idea about writing 50,000 words of a novel in 30 days.
Yes. And I did NaNoWriMo actually when I was writing the first draft of The Key of Rain, my second book in the Age of Prophecy series. And NaNoWriMo is awesome. NaNoWriMo is really a hurry up and fail machine.
Yes.
And it says that anybody in NaNoWriMo, so NaNoWriMo stands for National Novel Writing Month. It's something that Chris Beatty started just with his friends, just to encourage a whole bunch of people, hey, who wants to write a book? Let's get together and we'll try to write a book in a month. He literally says it came up with the 50,000 because he took all the books off his shelves, found the shortest novel he had, and it was about 50,000 words. It's like, okay, that's the minimum size of book.
My biggest is 45,000. That's my biggest.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm working my way up. It takes time, you know?
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. And he created this thing, National Novel Writing Month, where you try to write a book in 30 days. And to me, it was great. The first draft of The Key of Rain, I just needed to get out there and write. Before I started self-editing, before I tried, looking over my shoulder, before I started saying, is this good, is this not good? It's really about getting out there and doing it. And I went through iteration after iteration after iteration of The Key of Rain later. This version doesn't resemble at all the one that I wrote during
not at all.
NaNoWriMo, but the very structure of it is awesome. And there was a get-together at a local cafe with other writers who were in NaNoWriMo, and we had challenges, and we did different things to encourage each other, and each day you'd put your word count into the software, and it would let you know how you're doing, and when you hit the 50,000 words, it's all about quantity and not about quality. Nobody's assessing the quality of your work, but if you hit 50,000 words, you're a NaNoWriMo winner, and I wound up getting a discount on the writing software that I use now, and a little badge I can put on Facebook. Hey, I run one NaNoWriMo. It's all designed to get you to go out there and try faster.
It's about quality, it's about quantity, not quantity. Reminds me of it's all about quantity, not quality. It's all about, reminds me of that movie with Brad Pitt, and he's working for the Oakland A's, and he only hires baseball players that can hit. He doesn't care if they can catch. He doesn't care if they can pitch.
Moneyball.
Moneyball.
Yes.
Such a good movie because that's the main thing in baseball is if you can hit and get on base. He didn't care about anything else. And same thing with this. You have to say NaNoWriMo.
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 Novel Writing Month.
And I love the concept. You call it a vomit draft.
Yes.
Right. So it's the same thing with baseball. It doesn't matter what else he can do as long as he can hit. All you want to do is get the words down on paper and get to 50,000 words. And then they say writing is really about rewriting, which is obviously is true. That's you can write the book, but then you spend more time rewriting the book and editing it. And
oh yeah, my first book, the Lamp of Darkness, took me 6 years to write, and I was really teaching myself how to be a writer during that process. I must have rewritten that book 20 times.
Yeah. So that got you. That's one way that if people, I know a lot of people come, hey coach, I'd love to be a writer. I'm like, just start writing and just let the ideas flow down on paper, and then you go back and rewrite as time goes on. And you got to put stuff away. I know as I still don't consider myself a writer, even though I'm writing all the time, because I don't know. No one reads my books. I don't. What? So what you should be doing is just writing it down, getting it down on paper, and then you go back and edit it after a few weeks. And take time. It takes time. 30 days to write a book is just the vomit draft, not the final edition.
And you'll find that books have their own personality.
Yeah.
For instance, you brought up The Cash Machine, how The Cash Machine is a love story. I never in my life thought I'd write a love story. That is so not me. And it didn't start out as a love story.
Really?
It started out as actually a buddy book between these two guys who were on the same path and went different ways. And then one of them had this girlfriend, and the girlfriend was kind of the third main character. And then she wound up bumping out the number 2 character and saying, this is about the two of us. I'm the second main character. Yeah, and then she wound up bumping out the number 1 character and said, no, really, this is a book about me. And my boyfriend, okay, he can be like a second character. But the third main character in the initial drafts became the main character. And it's a first-person narrative from her perspective, became the main character in the final draft just by following the threads and letting the book dictate to me where I was going.
I'd love to talk about that book because it's great, but I want to try to stay on the rhythm fail, right? So so let's talk about Mount Everest for a minute.
Yes.
Yeah, John Krakauer, who wrote a book. What's the name of his book called?
Into the
Wild?
Into Thin Air.
Well, Into Thin Air and Into the Wild. I think he did both those books.
Yes.
Yes. So Into Thin Air is about the fateful, I guess, trek to Mount Everest. And I think over a dozen people died. Something I don't remember the numbers, but many, many people died. But do you know what the percentage of deaths are on people that have attempted Mount Everest, the final climb?
I think there might be 300 or so who've died making the climb.
Percentage-wise,
I don't know the percentage. I don't know.
14%.
14% of people.
I was shocked. I kept looking. This is hard to believe. That if you attempt the summit, they call it the summit, the final.
Yes.
I don't know how many thousand square feet. I mean, how many? I think Everest is 29,000 square feet. 28,000 feet in high.
It's higher. I believe the death zone starts at 32,000. I think it goes up to like 34,000 if I'm not.
Is that what it is?
If I'm not mistaken. I got it right here.
Yeah. So anyway, that 14% of those people die. I'm like, would you ever try that? In your book, you talk about people literally practicing stair climbers and attempt this. So how does the Mount Everest danger fit into your book?
So I use the Everest example. For whatever reason, this particular climb that John Krakauer was on, I read multiple books on this climb, saw multiple talks on this climb. I don't know why I was so fascinated by it. I kept coming back to it over and over again. And part of what hit me was when you have a really big goal like Everest, with a huge percentage of people who die in the attempt, like you said, point out 14%. And it just kept hitting me, all the little things that kept going wrong and the whole chain of things that led to all of these people dying. And I wanted to highlight, this is not what we're talking about when we're talking about hurry up and failing. We're not talking about going and doing something so big with such horrible consequences that if you don't succeed, you could die. We're actually talking about structuring failures that are going to be very low stakes. Not practicing on just a Stairmaster, then going up and trying the biggest mountain in the world, but how can you actually try something that is much, much smaller, succeed, okay, then step it up, then step it up from there. You don't want to be doing an Everest. You don't want to be putting yourself in a position where you could seriously harm yourself through failure. You want to be creating failures that are very small, you're going to get lots of learning from them quickly without kind of putting yourself on one huge success or failure moment that could really destroy you.
So the idea with Mount Everest is that sometimes fear of failure is healthy to have,
Exactly.
especially when it has to do with your life, which is going to segue into Richard Branson when he attempted to cross the Pacific in a balloon. That was a great story you wrote.
So Richard Branson is a really fascinating character because on the one hand, he's a daredevil, and you'd think he would have died dozens of times based on some of the crazy things he's attempted. But on the flip side, the way he runs his business is he's always looking to minimize his downside. He's always looking for ways of engineering business ventures so that if he fails, it won't tear him down and he won't have huge financial loss and he can easily go on to the next venture.
So tell me how he started Virgin Airlines.
So Virgin Atlantic Airlines is a perfect example. He actually was able to negotiate with Boeing that should he fail, that they would buy back the 747 he purchased from them. And not only would they buy it back, but they'd buy it back for more money than he paid.
If the market was...
If the market went up, which it did.
Yeah.
So the plane was actually worth more after a year than it was when they bought it. So they would have had to pay him more than he had paid for the plane. And he knew that they were so eager to get this plane sold and they wanted a competitor to British Airways that he was able to push and push and push. So really, he was starting an airline with very little downside because the plane was fully refundable.
Yeah, that's amazing that you can do that. And of course, it's the idea you talked about in this book that sometimes you want to try things a little bit in small amounts before you go full. Like you talk about Elon Musk. Elon Musk can't say, hey, I want to try making this car and see if anyone buys it. You can't just design a car in like 3 months for like, $1 million and come out with a car and see if anyone buys it. That doesn't work that way with cars. But to start an airline, there are planes already existing. You just need to get a route and start selling seats. And I know a lot of people have started airlines by doing charters. Like
Yes.
I know people have done charters for colleges for spring break. People do charters for ski trips. People do charters for beach trips, different places, and people, the Galapagos Islands. They do charters to fly groups down there, and that's one way you can start in the airline. But he started this airline without taking a lot of risk, which is amazing.
Exactly. So you're always looking to protect your downside. And that's one of the real things about hurry up and fail. The more you can protect your downside, the more you can go out there and try things and potentially fail. Because if you're going to succeed, you're going to succeed big, as he did. And if you fail, you're going to fail small. So you want to have asymmetrical risk reward.
Yeah, this is kind of like I'm a coin dealer. I used to be a coin dealer. I'm actually going back to the business now. And that's how I deal in coins. I try to buy coins for as little money as possible to have the biggest upside. Right. And there are coins you can sometimes buy for $1,000. It can be worth $10,000, $20,000, $30,000.
Wow.
It does happen. I want to discuss his trip over the Pacific in that balloon that he really died 3 times. He should have died 3 times. I think the first one was when he left. Was it Japan he left?
Yeah, they flew from Japan.
And he had to let go one of the canisters that had fuel. I guess was it fuel for the balloon? And he let that, instead of one canister down, he accidentally let like 3 or 4 other ones down. So they lost fuel. And the balloon, I believe anything over 43,000 feet, he can't survive up there. And the balloon was starting up too high, and he had to figure a way to keep below 43,000
Exactly.
feet.
2 extra gas canisters fell off. So he didn't have enough fuel to make the trip.
Right.
At least as much as he'd planned he needed. And he shot up all the way up to the point where he was in danger of the entire capsule he was in exploding.
Oh, right.
Because of the altitude.
Because of the pressure. It wasn't because of the air, because the pressure of the air was so tight that the capsule will explode. And that was one of them. And I remember the last one was when he landed in some ice lake in Canada.
Exactly.
And they weren't rescued yet, and they were going to have, die from being frozen to death. But there was one other one. Do you happen to remember the other one that he almost died?
At a certain point, the balloon capsule caught fire.
Oh, right. There was a fire on board. And and they had to get up higher, close to 43,000 feet, because that's where the air's thin, where there's no...
Where the fire would go out, exactly.
Yeah, because no air to burn. There's nothing to burn the fire. Wow. That is an amazing story. Yeah.
It is. But part of why I brought up that story in the book is to really contrast. Like, he's this larger-than-life daredevil type, but as much as Richard Branson risks his life on a regular basis in some crazy ventures like ballooning across the Pacific, which a number of people had died in attempting...
Yeah.
His mindset is always, in business, how can I protect myself and minimize my downside? And so we expect that in business he's going to be a daredevil too. But if you actually unpack what he's done, he's been incredibly smart and calculating about minimizing the risk of his failures.
But taking a balloon up the Pacific, how much minimizing can you do? There's not
in his personal life. He has not.
Wait,
That's why I'm
contradiction between his personal life and his his business.
Yes. When we talked about Everest being something that it's good to have a healthy fear of failure, Everest is so much safer than the things that Branson has done in a balloon.
I know.
That it is.
You're not going to fall out of the sky or blow up. You're just going to freeze to death. Which, by the way, I believe is like if you have to die, that is like the best way to die, from what I understand. Do you know about this?
I'd rather go in my sleep personally.
Of course. But if you have a choice of like either starvation, I heard starvation is the worst. God, I mean, no one ever know this.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. Anyway, so let's talk about Marie Forleo.
Marie Forleo, yes.
Forleo. Tell me about her.
So Marie Forleo created B School, and I was a B School student. And at first, I didn't sign up for B School because I actually thought it only took female.
What is B School?
B School is basically a business school online course. Mm-hmm. And Marie Forleo teaches all of these different techniques about business. And I was looking at it, and A, it was expensive. It was a couple $1,000s. Mm-hmm. And B, every single person on there
was a woman.
Yeah. I'm like, am I even allowed to take this course? I'm not certain if I am. And then I went and took B School, and I learned a lot from the course, but I even learned more from the way that Marie Forleo put the course together. And one of the things that really spoke to me was this idea of surprise bonuses. That you'd think if you're selling a $2,000 course, you want to show as much value up front as possible. You want people to like reach in their pocket and pull out the $2,000, and you want them to feel like they're getting a good deal on that. But part of what was counterintuitive that I got from Marie was that, you know what, you also want to be slipping things in under the door that you're not telling people about, you're creating zero expectations around.
Sure.
And you want to keep surprising people so that they walk away thinking, oh, I paid $2,000 to get this, and I got so much more than I bargained for.
Sure.
And I watched how Marie Forleo did that with B School, how she kept adding surprise bonus after surprise bonus. And even though I'd paid a ton of money, and these bonuses really didn't cost her a lot to create, I was walking away feeling like, oh, wow, she exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
Whereas I contrast that with the piece of software that I'd bought, which was super cheap. I got an incredible deal on it. And the CEO said, hey, I'd love to speak to you one-on-one and show you the software. And then he didn't show up for that meeting. He had somebody else show up for the meeting.
Yeah, you were disappointed.
And I was disappointed.
You know, it was a great deal.
It was a great deal. It was a fabulous deal. It was a much better deal relative to what I paid than B School was. But B School, I thought I was getting a certain amount and I got more. This piece of software, I thought I was getting a certain amount and I got less. And that left me with a bad taste in my mouth.
So you have these personal connections to B School, even though you didn't get as much value for your money. It was a lot more money because you have a personal connection because they gave you more than what they told you they're going to give you.
They gave me more than what they promised. And this is one of 3 elements we go into in Hurry Up and Fail about how you can get people to excuse your failures, because you don't really want to go out there. Say you're a business owner, you've got all these clients, you've got all these customers. You don't want people to feel like you failed on them. So how can you go out there and hurry up and fail and try new things and push the envelope without disappointing all of your followers? So that's one of the 3 things we looked at, was you go out and you intentionally exceed expectations. You try to give value that you are not promising, that the people aren't expecting. And that is one of the things that people say, oh, wow, yes, it might not have been perfect. It might have been an early draft, but wow, did I feel like you over-delivered for me?
Yeah, I sometimes I give talks sometimes, and one thing I've seen other people when they speak, they go, "Oh, you're gonna love this joke, or you're gonna love this story." I never anticipate what people are gonna feel, because I don't want to. Suddenly, their expectations are much higher, and then of course I'm never gonna come through. So I just say, here's a story, and I don't say great story. I catch myself not saying, "Oh, you're gonna love this, you're gonna think this is funny," because I'm not gonna predict what someone's gonna feel, but I want to give them things that they're not expecting, because then they'll have a better connection with me and enjoy my information better. So rejection, like you said in the book, is like a muscle. You have to keep, in order for you to grow in life and to become greater, you have to it's called rejection therapy, I believe, right?
There's something called rejection therapy. And one of the stories I look in that section is actually Stephen King. Stephen King is one of my favorite authors, and 11/22/63 is one of my all-time favorite books.
His first book being?
His first book being Carrie.
Carrie, 1964, yes. I think.
And it took him a lot of failures before he got to Carrie. And as Stephen King was a kid, he was writing and submitting and writing and submitting and writing and submitting.
14 years old, you said.
And, well, He eventually got to 14.
Yeah.
He started off taking his rejection slips when he'd send things into magazines and put them on a nail. When he was 14, the nail was no longer strong enough to hold all the rejection slips he'd received, and he had to replace the nail with a spike to hold them. So he'd already been submitting even at, I don't even know how old he was the first time he submitted.
Yeah.
But already by the time he was 14, he'd received enough rejection slips to overwhelm a nail. And you see, like, this is part of how he became such a fabulous writer. If you spend 20 years writing the perfect novel and that's only then put it out, it's probably not going to be so great. But if you write and submit and write and submit and write and submit, you're probably going to get a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. He's got like 70 or 80 books out there.
He's got a ton.
Yeah, a ton of books. Let's talk about investigative failure. So there's a TV show called Shark Tank, very popular, and you talk a lot about a number of different stories that have gone on Shark Tank. One being Mixed Bikini, another called Mrs. Goldfarb's Unreal Deli, and the third being I don't remember the third one, but you discussed these different ones and how one failed and one didn't from expectations of success. And you mentioned that Mixed Bikini, they went on Shark Tank, and when they introduced their product for the first time, they had no sales because the server failed.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that for a minute.
So we're looking, this is in the section we talk about premortems.
Yeah.
So a premortem is something very, very simple. So let's start the other way. A postmortem, you can look at Mixed Bikini, you could say, well, why did they fail? Well, it's very easy to see, oh, wow, they were on national television and they came out with this product.
Mixed Bikini, explain, I believe
Mixed Bikini was a product that went on Shark Tank, and instead of women buying a bikini as a set with a top and a bottom, Mixed Bikini allowed you to buy a separate top and a separate bottom so that you can mix and match and come up with any combination you want. Barbara Corcoran put $50,000 into it on Shark Tank, and it was a big success. And the night it came out, they threw a huge party.
Oh, that's right.
And celebrated, the big launch at
with lots
Shark
of women
Tank.
in bikinis.
Lots of women in bikinis and lots of alcohol and a big pool. And the next day the CEO shows up at the office and says, "Okay, how many sales did we make?" And he sees none. And while he was out there partying, his product was on TV, and lots of people tried to go to his website and buy it, enough so that it just brought down the website. It crashed. And all these people who had all this interest they couldn't find his products. They left, and the company wound up going under. And you can see, looking backwards, where they messed up. It's like, okay, don't spend your time partying. Spend your time instead making sure you've got a robust enough website to make sure that it can handle any load that it gets. That would be a post-mortem investigation. You look at a failure and you say, why did this fail?
Sure.
But this is in the section we're talking about premortems. We're talking about, you know what? It's kind of predictable that when you go on a national TV show, you've got your tiny little company, that your volume is going to go absolutely through the roof if you've got a good product, and they did. And so, you know what? Maybe you should have worked on the website and made it stronger. Maybe you should have seen that coming. And I brought up the example of our friend, we call her Cool Jen. She's known as Mrs. Goldfarb professionally. And, she pitched Mrs. Goldfarb's Unreal Deli. And she had a deal with Mark Cuban. And I talked to her, like, what happened after that? What follow-up was there? What preparation was there to make sure that you didn't become another Mixed Bikini? And she pointed out, like, it's very simple. Like, he's got his whole team of people that help. And they went through all of these different ways that the business could fail when it launched on big nationwide. And they wanted to make sure that the website was on a strong enough platform. It happened to be that she was already on the platform that they recommended, so there's nothing to change there.
Shopify, I believe, right?
Shopify, exactly. But when you see an area with very predictable types of failure, you want to use checklists. That's why surgeons use checklists before going into surgery. That's why pilots use checklists before launching. That's why when you launch on Shark Tank, the smart thing is to have a checklist of all the ways that you can fail. And Barbara Corcoran apparently didn't do that with Mixed Bikini.
I think you said it's called failing to ask is asking to fail.
Yes.
So you have to go through all of the things that can happen, perceive beforehand. What are these things that can go wrong, and nip them in the bud before you proceed with your opening?
Yep.
Yeah. Was there a third? So how did Mrs. Goldfarb's Unreal Deli do on her opening day?
Did great.
And is she still in business?
She's still in business. She's been killing it. She's been growing quickly.
Really? And where does she live?
She lives in LA.
Oh, very nice. I guess that is considered not real meat, right?
Exactly. It's vegan. It's vegan deli meat. She actually used to be right here in Jerusalem. She used to come to our Shabbat table all the time.
No
when she was living
way.
in Jerusalem.
That's amazing.
And she was somebody who was a real regular in our house. And
can you get her product here in Israel or
not as far as I know?
Yeah, in America you can get it though.
Yes.
Oh wow, I have to try it next time I get there. So there's something called successful synergy. What is that? I remember seeing this in your book, successful synergy. Do you remember what that was about?
I do not recall using that phrase.
Okay, we're going to move on for now. Oh, early warning systems. I think this is also similar to, foreseeing failure, also to build in these early warning systems. You talked about when you went down to Ramon's crater to go visit, and you happened to see a science museum there about Elon Ramon.
So we went to Ramon crater, and it's a beautiful place to hike, to look at the stars. And we got there and it was a huge storm. We couldn't see like 5 feet in front of us. So we went to the visitor center and they had all these things on the geology of the Ramon crater and all that. But then they had also an exhibit to a different Ramon, to Elon Ramon, who's the most famous pilot in Israel history. And he had died aboard the Columbia space shuttle, which burned up upon re-entry. And part of the tragic thing about the Columbia disaster,
they knew about it.
They didn't know about it on the day of launch. The day after, they watched the entire launch in super slow motion, and they saw that a piece of foam had broken off of one of the fuel tanks and hit the wing at over 500 miles per hour.
Yes.
And they didn't know, did this damage one of the heat-resistant tiles on the wing that would protect the shuttle on re-entry, or did it not? And there were these 3 different requests made within NASA to investigate. They could have sent an astronaut out in a spacewalk.
They could have done that.
Or they could have taken a picture of it just by passing a satellite.
Did they not take that picture?
They didn't.
Oh, they never saw a picture of a broken heat shield then.
They did not know there's a broken heat shield. They only figured that out after they picked up all the broken pieces that spread across Louisiana and Texas.
Yes.
And they found over 40,000 pieces of this blown up space shuttle, and they were able to work backwards and kind of figure out exactly what had happened there. But the point was, in the section we talked about early warning systems. We talked about another example at a certain rave concert about doing drug tests in order to find if there was any adulterated drugs to make sure that you didn't have this big disaster like you had in this concert in Buenos Aires. It's important to have ways to detect things early. And the Elon Ramon story is given in the following chapter, which is that it's, 1, super important to have early warning systems to let you know when something is going wrong. But 2, you have to be able, need the emotional fortitude to listen to those warnings when they come up. So if your early warning systems do go off, well, what are you going to do about it? And so you have to be really careful. Sometimes we make early warning systems that are so sensitive. I've got this one website that every single day I get an email that says there's something wrong with the site.
Yeah.
It's too sensitive. I stopped paying attention to those warnings, many, many years ago. And so you can't have too many warnings. You need to make sure that you're only seeing important warnings. And then you need to make sure that you're actually following through and investigating, because with the Columbia disaster, their early warning systems were phenomenal, but they didn't follow through and investigate and do anything about it.
I talk about warning systems, you don't hear it so much anymore, but cars used to have these alarms, and would be in, DC somewhere and sleeping in a hotel, and car alarm would go off. No one's looking out their window like, someone's stealing that car, because car alarms would go off. They became worthless alarms. Someone could steal a car, no one would care, because everyone's car alarm would go off. It's almost like the alarms you have in your house. They'd go off so much, like, stop turning my alarm on, because it was worthless. Now with the shuttle, just so you understand that when the shuttle comes back into Earth's atmosphere, it heats up to 3,000 degrees. So the space shuttle has to have these heat shields covering all parts of it. And when this piece of foam fell off, they were concerned that it would hit a piece of the shield and knock a piece of the shield off. Now, I'm surprised that NASA didn't take a satellite and get a picture of it, or send just one spacewalk. I know spacewalks are dangerous, but that's a major thing. Because you mentioned in the book that they had another shuttle ready to go within like 30 days, and they could have survived up there that long. They could have lowered the amount of oxygen in the air. They could have rationed their food. They had plenty of food and water. That NASA didn't do an attempt to make a rescue. And instead of having to risk their lives to come back in, and there was one piece of heat shield that wasn't on there. Because of that, that's why the shuttle didn't make it through the entry.
Yeah, the problem was they didn't even investigate to see whether there was damage or not. They had at least 3 internal requests to say, we're concerned about this. please look at this. And they just ignored it.
Yeah. Well, because no one wants to find out that there's a mistake, especially when the cost would have been astronomical, obviously. But you mentioned in the book that the items that insurance companies put a value on a human life.
Right.
I think you said that value is $10 million. But that is for a random human life, right? Just a random, it's like, I had a deal with lung cancer, and they say, okay, the average time that you live with lung cancer is, 3.5 years, whatever it is. But that's a statistical average. That's not one specific person. So when you know the value of one specific person, when it's Elon Ramon or some astronaut from NASA, well, it's not $10 million anymore because now you know who they are, right? And so it doesn't matter how much it's going to cost. You're going to try to save their lives. And I thought it was really interesting how, people, they had the wherewithal to look and find that there was this broken heat shield, but they didn't take a picture of it or do an attempt for a spacewalk. So that was that they ignored the early warning system, I guess, is what you're trying to say. So what else do you want to tell me about this book? And what was the what I want to know about this book is, what was your inspiration to write this book? Because this is so different than your other books. Your other books on The Lamp of Darkness and The Key of Rain are more like Bible-focused books, right? And your Cash Machine is a finance book, and your Size of Your Dreams is a personal growth book. And this one's about a business. It's really kind of a business book, isn't it?
It's definitely a business book. It's both. It's business. It also has a lot of elements that go into the personal. I love teaching through story. All of my books teach through story. My Age of Prophecy tries to immerse people in the biblical world through a novel. Cash Machine is a novel that teaches financial lessons. The Size of Your Dreams is a novel that teaches all kinds of lessons about life. And this is my first time actually going into the realm of pure nonfiction. One of the difficulties I've had with the other books, in fact, is that they don't actually fit into any categories. They're, The Cash Machine, it's a novel and it's a money book. There's no categories for money books. The novel money books.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist.
Category, you'll be number one.
Exactly. So this is the first one that actually fits into a real category, that it's just a pure nonfiction book. And I'm still able to teach through stories, but looking at stories of actual people. It's a very different writing experience. I think I enjoy the writing experience of the others better, the Size Your Dreams type books, where I can just make up whatever situations I want and have my characters do whatever I need them to. It's very easy to mold it to that, whereas this one just needed so much research, and then research upon the research.
This was a lot of research in this.
Yeah, so much research in this one, because I'm sharing stories of real people. I need to make sure I'm getting the facts right.
Yeah.
And so when I'm writing The Size of Your Dreams, my characters can do whatever I want them to do. in Hurry Up and Fail, I'm trying to teach all these different principles, but since I'm doing it through stories, I need to make sure that I'm really accurate to all of the stories that I'm representing.
Yeah. You talk a lot about, one of my favorite things really is trying something for as little money as possible, like just testing these things out. And you talked about Airbnb, how Airbnb started with a bunch of guys who, I think there was a conference coming to San Francisco, I believe.
Yep.
And, excuse me, there was no room in the hotels, and hey, let's rent our air mattresses. I guess that's why it's called Airbnb.
It is.
Because it was air mattresses they were renting. Which is funny, they kept the name Air Bed and Breakfast.
Yeah, so their initial website was airbedandbreakfast.com.
Yeah.
They later shortened it to Airbnb. But one of the things that was amazing about that, they actually built a website in just a couple of days. And it didn't do any of the things that I love about the Airbnb website now. It didn't take credit cards. It didn't have that little map view where you could drag it along and things would change. All it did was going to advertise the fact that you could rent an air mattress in their apartment for, I think, $80 per night.
Yes.
When there was a big design show coming to San Francisco and all the hotels were booked out. So this is in the section we talk about minimum viable products, and we look at least 3 different forms of minimum viable product, a way that you can test a business idea without needing a tremendous amount of funding behind it. So Airbnb was able to take their hypothesis: would people rent out an air mattress in somebody else's apartment, or would they not? They were able to test that idea with a tiny amount of money. And later on, they kept talking to people. They were looking for funding. They were looking to get into Y Combinator as an incubator. And a lot of people thought that their idea was pretty stupid. But they couldn't deny that they went out there, they tried it with no budget, and it worked.
Why do people think it was stupid?
People thought it was stupid because they didn't think that people would trust one another enough to want to rent a place in their apartments. Which is interesting to me because I actually knew at the same time that Airbnb was coming out, even before, there's something called couch surfing. And that was the Airbnb concept, except with no money.
Yeah.
People would allow strangers to stay in their house for free. And I knew friends who were doing that. So I was like, well, yeah, if it works for free, it'll probably work for money.
Sure.
But all these people were comparing it to hotels and saying nobody is going to spend money to stay in somebody else's apartment. You could be a psychopath. Who knows what you'd get? Or if your apartment, you'd have somebody else come in there. They could be a psychopath. This isn't going to work. And so people rejected it. But they couldn't deny they had tried it and it had worked.
So Airbnb is definitely one of my favorite companies. And I'd love to talk to you more about Airbnb and some of these other companies you mentioned, how they were able to start with very little risk. And that's kind of like one of my favorite things I think I want to continue discussing with you about, but we have to go now. I know you have to leave and I have to leave. But this book, Hurry Up and Fail, I can't tell you how much I highly recommend this. We're going to put a link below for you to purchase this on Amazon. And I'm sure it's as an ebook, and it's just it's not a hardcover, I assume, right? Just a paperback?
Yeah, paperback, ebook, and the audiobook will be up soon, hopefully.
Oh, who's doing the audiobook? Are you?
No, I found somebody online.
No way. That's amazing. I've never done an audiobook before, but I highly recommend this book, and I really want to have you back again because I didn't even get to really touch a lot of ideas in this book that are so insightful, and I think can help anyone who wants to grow a business, anyone who wants to become greater in life and really reach your potential. There's so many great ideas here about failure and how you can look at it in different ways and how really you need to hurry up and fail. Thank you so much. This is the Living in Clarity podcast. I'm Coach Ratner. We'll see you next time.